There's a mall in South St. Louis County that tells a much bigger story about American retail. South County Center is not abandoned. It's not one of those dead malls where the only things left are broken skylights and YouTube Explorers. It's still open. It still has stores. Its owner, CBL, currently lists South County Center as having 55 stores, about 979,000 square feet, and an estimated 4.1 million annual visitors. But it also has all the signs of a mall trying to figure out what comes next. The old anchor stores, they're disappearing. Sears closed years ago. Macy's closed last year. The second floor has reportedly been closed off, with retail consolidated onto the first floor. And now local officials are asking a very modern question. What if the next anchor tenant is not another department store? What if it's a youth hockey tournament? South County Center sits at 18 South County Center Way, less than 10 miles from downtown St. Louis, near major highways, including I-55 and I-255. CBL's own leasing materials emphasize the mall's highway access and trade area of roughly 476,000 people. That matters because the mall was built for an older version of suburban life. You drive, you park here, you shop here, you eat here, you spend an afternoon here, and weirdly, that same formula might also describe the future of youth sports tourism. In early 26, St. Louis Call newspapers reported that the county council had passed a resolution allowing Explore St. Louis to conduct a $135,000 feasibility study into turning South County Center into a sports complex and event center. The concept would likely focus on youth hockey and ice rinks, while also allowing the space to host other events when it's not being used for hockey. That's the case study, not a completed redevelopment, not a guaranteed success story, a question. Can a struggling mall be saved by kids' sports? South County Center is useful because it's not some random empty building. It was one of the St. Louis area's long-running suburban retail centers. For decades, a mall like this worked because it had anchors. The department stores pulled people in, the smaller stores lived off the traffic, the food court lived off the time people spent inside. But once the anchors weakened, the whole logic of the building changed. A mall does not just need tenants, it needs a reason for people to come repeatedly. That's why youth sports is so interesting, because it can do something a dying mall desperately needs. It can create scheduled, repeatable, family-based traffic. Youth sports tourism has become one of the most important forces in local economic development. According to Sports ETA's 2026 State of the Industry report, sports tourism in the U.S. generated $274 billion in total economic impact in 2025, including $111 billion in direct spending and 124 million hotel room nights. And the part most relevant to the story is participatory sports tourism, mostly youth and amateur sports. That segment generated $60 billion in direct spending, $149 billion in total economic impact, and 226 million travelers. That's the reason cities are suddenly so interested in volleyball courts and soccer fields and baseball complexes and ice rinks. Youth tournaments are basically conventions with shin guards. They fill hotels, they feed restaurants, they use parking lots, they create off-peak weekend demand, and unlike a concert or one-time event, they can happen over and over again. For a mall owner or local government, that's the dream, a new kind of anchor that does not depend on people wanting to buy pants at a department store. It depends on parents being willing to drive 3 hours because their kid has a tournament. In South County, the proposed focus is especially interesting because it's not just sports in general, it's hockey. And hockey has one major real estate problem. Ice is expensive, it's specialized, it's limited. You can't just mark lines on a field. You need a building and refrigeration and maintenance and locker rooms and scheduling and enough paid usage to keep the whole thing running. That scarcity is part of what makes the South County proposal attractive to supporters. At a local town hall, residents talked about the shortage of ice time. One resident said her husband's team practices across 4 different rinks because ice can be so hard to secure. County Councilman Mike Archer said he knew of families where 10 and 12-year-olds had ice times as late as 10:35 p.m. So on one level, this is a simple story. A community has a struggling mall. A community also has a shortage of sports infrastructure. Maybe one problem can solve the other. But that's where the case gets complicated. The key question is not just whether South County Center can become a sports complex. The question is, who's it for? If the project is justified as a community benefit, then local families need real access, better practice times, affordable programming, more ice for local teams, maybe learn to skate programs, maybe public skating, maybe high school and club hockey that does not require parents to drive all over the region. But if the project's justified as sports tourism, then the strongest business case probably comes from outside visitors. Weekend tournaments, showcases, hotel room nights, restaurant spending. That's the tension inside almost every youth sports redevelopment pitch. To the city, the project is attractive because it imports money. To local parents, the project is attractive because it might give their kids better access. Those goals can overlap, but they're not automatically the same thing. A facility can be marked as for the community, but still reserve its most valuable weekend slots for out-of-town tournaments. So the real test for South County is not just whether 2 ice rinks can be built, it's whether the operating model actually serves the kids who live there. There's also another local concern, existing rinks. At the town hall, one resident specifically asked how a new rink at South County Center would affect nearby venues, including Merrimack Sharks Hockey Club, All-American Sports Mall, and the Afton Ice Rink. Archer responded that the feasibility study would examine that question. That's important because new sports facilities are often sold as pure upside. More games, more kids, more visitors, more spending. But in the real market, demand is not infinite. A new facility could expand access. It could also pull teams, bookings, and revenue away from existing rinks that are already part of the local sports ecosystem. So the feasibility study has to answer a harder question. Then, would people like more ice? Of course they would. The question is there enough demand at the right price, at the right times, to support a new complex without simply weakening the facilities that already exist? That's the difference between solving a shortage and just moving the same dollars to a different building. Still, you can see why this idea keeps coming up. A dead or struggling mall has a lot of what a sports complex needs. It has land, it has parking, it has highway access, it has big boxes that can potentially be reused or replaced. It has utilities, bathrooms, loading areas, food service infrastructure, and existing retail around it. And most importantly, it has a problem that youth sports might be uniquely good at solving: empty space. The old mall model was built around shopping as the main event. The new model might be built around activity as the main event. You don't go to the mall because you want to wander past 80 stores. You go because your kid has a game. And while you're there, the rest of the property tries to capture the spillover. Coffee before the first game, lunch between games, a sporting goods store for equipment, a restaurant after the tournament, a hotel nearby for families from out of town. That's why youth sports is becoming a redevelopment strategy, not just a parks and rec issue. It gives old retail land a new reason to exist. But this is also where the warning label belongs. Youth sports tourism is real. The spending, it's real. The demand, it's real. But that doesn't mean every sports complex works. The cautionary example is Mesa, Arizona, where Legacy Park, later known as Bell Bank Park and then Arizona Athletic Grounds, became one of the most dramatic failures in the youth sports complex boom. In 2025, the SEC charged individuals connected to the project with using false documents tied to about $284 million in municipal bond offerings for a massive sports and entertainment complex. The SEC alleged that the complex opened with far fewer events, lower attendance, much less revenue than projected, and that the bonds defaulted in 22. The Department of Justice later said the project defaulted, filed for bankruptcy in 23, and was sold for less than $26 million, with less than $2.5 million going back towards roughly $284 million owed to bondholders. That doesn't mean South County is Mesa. It means the spreadsheet matters. A sports complex is not magic. It's a business with operating costs and debt, scheduling pressure, maintenance, staffing, insurance, and constant competition for events. If the projections are too optimistic, the building does not care that the renderings looked good. So, before anyone can say U Sports will save South County Center, the feasibility study needs to prove a few things. First, real demand. Not just people like hockey, but actual teams and leagues and tournaments and schools and event operators willing to book the space at rates that support the facility. Second, local access. If public or tourism dollars are involved, the community needs to know who gets the best time slots and whether local kids can afford to use the facility. Third, the effect on existing rinks. A new complex should ideally grow the local hockey ecosystem, not just cannibalize it. Fourth, the rest of the mall. Does a sports complex coexist with retail? Does it replace part of the mall? Does it trigger hotels and restaurants? Does it create a new mixed-use district? Or does it become an isolated box surrounded by half-empty parking lots? And fifth, risk. Who pays if the numbers do not work? The owner? A private developer? The county? A tourism agency? Taxpayers? Bondholders? Because the phrase economic impact sounds clean in a presentation. But in real life, someone is always carrying that downside. So, can U Sports save a dead mall? Maybe. But it depends on what we mean by save. If saving the mall means bringing back the old world of department stores, packed food courts, teenagers wandering around on Friday nights, probably not. That version of the mall is not coming back in most places. But if saving the mall means saving the land, saving the tax base, giving a suburban community a new gathering place, then U Sports might be one of the more realistic options. Because the American family did not stop driving to large suburban destinations. The destination changed. It used to be the mall. Now it might be a tournament. And that's what makes South County Center so interesting. It's not just a local mall story. It's a glimpse at a new suburban formula. The department store becomes the risk. The food court becomes the between games economy. The parking lot becomes tournament infrastructure. And the anchor tenant is no longer Macy's. It's a 12-year-old with a hockey bag. The opportunity is real, but so is the risk. U Sports can bring traffic, money, life back to places that retail left behind. But if the numbers are inflated, if local families are priced out, or if the whole thing is built mainly to chase hotel nights, then the mall's not being saved. It's just being replaced by another version of pay-to-play suburbia. So the question is not only whether U Sports can save a dead mall. The better question is, who gets to play in the mall that comes next?